Hey, how are you? My name is Ben, and I am a movie buff. So, this is something new that I am trying, and really it's because I had the thought a few weeks ago about the fact that every time I check my YouTube channel, which isn't often, but when I do, I kind of notice that the last couple of years have had this trend where most of the year I don't post anything, and then either at the beginning of a new year or at the end of a year that we're just finishing, I post my favorite movies of a given year that I've seen, so my best of list, which if you follow my channel, have seen that I do a lot of those videos, and I enjoy doing it. That sort of thing is a lot of fun. But then in between that time, basically from like February to November, as you'll see, I don't have that much content on the channel. I used to when I was starting the channel out, and especially during the first COVID lockdown, I had a lot of time on my hands. So, of course, I took some time to make some additional videos, which is great. But being the parent of two children, and just, there are obviously other things that I have on my plate, it's been tough to add more videos to this channel. So I kind of had the idea because, as you may have heard on a few occasions, I've been a guest on the Batjar podcast over the last, I think, 6 or 7 years, and unfortunately it ended recently, but I had a great time guest starring on it, that it got me thinking maybe I try for a bit, instead of making the usual videos, which of course involve a lot of scripting and filming and editing and putting in pictures and whatnot, that maybe I try something in the form of a podcast episode. The good thing about this format is that it being a podcast, hopefully there isn't as much editing to do. I mean, what you're looking at right now on the screen is just going to be the thing that's going to be there the whole time, so I don't have to really worry about the visual element, but obviously there's a lot to do with whatever discussion I'm bringing. But I figured that it's got to be a bit quicker to make these kinds of videos as opposed to making a scripted video with pictures and me being on camera. So I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to see what happens. And if people seem to enjoy it, I'm definitely open to doing more. I'm thinking maybe every other week is a very realistic schedule I can give myself to have these out, given that, life happens, right? Sometimes we get very busy, and whatever we were expecting to do sometimes just takes longer or goes slower than we expect. So, without further ado, welcome to a potentially temporary podcast series of mine, which is still under my YouTube channel here. And every time I do this podcast, I'm going to be talking about something different. This time, I am talking about one of my favorite Christmas movies that I don't think enough people have seen, and that is called Arthur Christmas. You might have heard of this movie. It is 12 years old now, so it's been around for a little while. But I do think it is one that does not get the recognition that it deserves. I think there are plenty other great Christmas movies, Home Alone and Die Hard, even though I know it's kind of debatable for some people, but then you've got It's a Wonderful Life and Elf and so on and so forth, and I feel like all of those get lots of recognition, but I feel like Arthur Christmas is sometimes left out of the conversation. The movie came out in 2011, and it made about $147 million at the box office, which is decent given its budget size, which was about $85 million. I remember it was probably a movie in 2010, seeing a teaser for this movie, and the teaser was cute, but I don't recall really thinking about the movie again or being excited to see it until it popped up in Netflix. And I think I saw the movie in 2015. It was the same year when Star Wars The Force Awakens was just about to come out, and I'd heard about this Arthur Christmas movie that I heard was pretty good, and I watched it with my parents, and I remember being blown away. I just could not believe how good it was. And shortly after, I was showing various members of my family because they had to see how awesome this movie was. So I want to dedicate this podcast episode talking about the movie in detail. For people that have followed this channel, you may have remembered that I think probably 4 or 5 years ago I did a video on this channel of my wife and I talking about our favorite animated movies. And of course, we did talk about Arthur Christmas, but we talked about it for a minute and then that was it. But I do want to talk about it in more detail, and that's the nice thing about this podcast structure, is that if I want to talk 10 minutes straight about a movie and kind of go here, there, and everywhere about my feelings of the movie, I can do that, assuming that people like listening to it. So without further ado, let's get on to Arthur Christmas and why I think it's a fantastic movie that you should watch as soon as possible. So what's Arthur Christmas about? Well, Arthur Christmas is about kind of the current condition of what the operation, what the Santa operation is in regards to getting all of the kids presents every Christmas night. So as we know, Santa drives, takes his sleigh with his reindeer and flies all around the world and gives all the nice kids presents. But we see in this movie how, with each passing year, basically the Santa title is given to Santa's son, and then the son after that, and so on and so forth. So in modern times, when this movie is set, being 2011, the Santa operation has actually changed a lot. It all honestly is still kind of doing the same thing, but not with a sleigh and a sack full of presents and 8 reindeer. It's this, basically, it looks like this gigantic spaceship that can camouflage itself and go quickly from one city to the next. And it's kind of a fun way for them to explain how they're able to get all the presents to millions of kids every year. So we see that in this operation that there is still a Santa. He is still involved, but he has a battalion, probably hundreds of elves, that help him deliver all of these presents. So they'll go to a specific city, and they can be in and out, delivering all the presents they need to, doing everything they need to, eating the cookies, drinking the milk, chomping the carrots, in a matter of minutes, because there are hundreds of elves and Santa himself coming down to take part in this operation. So it's changed a lot, and we see how in the North Pole that there's this grand headquarters, if you will. There's a whole bunch of elves on computers, and they're kind of monitoring what's going on, and they're also, there's lots of other work here, right? So gone are the days of Santa bringing a sack full of presents with 8 reindeer to all these kids. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of elves involved with getting Santa to every spot that he needs to be. Some of the key characters in this big operation, you have Arthur Christmas, obviously the titular fellow here, who answers the mail. He's a little clumsy and he's scared of everything, so they do their best to keep him away from anything really important where he can do harm. So they give him the safe job of being the one who answers the mail. So any kids that send Santa a letter, he's the one that kind of answers on Santa's behalf because Santa's busy. Then you have Steve, who is Arthur's brother, and Arthur and Steve are both the sons of the current Santa. And Steve is the one who kind of manages headquarters, so he's, the big important supervisor guy who's making sure that everything is happening the way it should be, and any problems that arise that he's kind of leading the charge about how to deal with said problem. And then obviously you have Santa, who's kind of out in the field, helping the elves, as much as he can, right? He's an old guy at the beginning of the movie, so of course there's not as much as that he can do, hence why a lot of the elves are helping him. And then you have Grand Santa, who is Santa's father, and he used to be Santa. He was kind of the last generation of Santas that would have a sack full of presents and be in the sleigh that would fly around with the reindeer. But of course, there were some issues with that and logistical things. So they designed, when the new Santa came in, they designed this program that is the big operation that we see at the beginning of the movie. Now, the big thing that happens during this operation is that there's kind of a tense moment where there's they refer to this child as a waker, right? Like the child wakes up and almost sees Santa, so they have to find a way to get Santa out of the room before the child sees him. And during this tense moment, a little mistake happens where a bike that is requested by this little girl named Gwen gets knocked off of a spot where it's supposed to be, meaning like it kind of goes to the bottom of this ship and it gets forgotten about. So even though at the end of the operation they think that they've gotten all the kids, it turns out that they missed a child. They missed Gwen. Her bike is found later on after basically everyone's kind of gone to bed. It's like 4:09 a.m. at this point once they've finished the operation and they think that, everything's done, good on us. But of course this child's been missed. And Steve and Santa, unfortunately, feel like, we've done a great job. We've done all that we can. So what if one child is missed? But Arthur does not want to stop and is hoping that there is a way that this bike can get back to Gwen, because she's the only child in the world that didn't get a present that should have. So what happens is you have Arthur Christmas joining forces with Grand Santa, and Grand Santa is going to help him get the bike to Gwen before she wakes up on Christmas morning. Because for Arthur, it's just appalling that a good girl like Gwen might wake up, go down to the tree and find that Santa didn't give her a gift when she deserved one. So the rest of the movie from this point is about Arthur and Grand Santa trying to get this gift to Gwen before she wakes up. And they've got a few hours, and of course there are all sorts of problems. They don't take the big ship that I mentioned earlier. They take Grand Santa's sleigh, the one that he was so fond of, and they take that trying to get to Gwen on time. So apologies for the very long-winded synopsis, but that is what the movie is about. And of course, I wanted to kind of talk about some of these elements because they're going to come up in my discussion later on. So I wish more people would watch this movie. I think it is so full of heart. I think it is so funny. I think it is so creative. It really does a lot of things that many other Christmas movies don't do. As some of you may know, like I've worked on a lot of Christmas movies made in Ontario, and while I think they all in common have, the Christmas spirit, and it looks like Christmas and it feels like Christmas, when it comes to the actual stories, it is very much a cut and paste kind of thing. So many times I read the scripts for these movies and it's like, okay, well, of course this thing is going to happen. Of course that thing is going to happen. And it looks like they're not going to get together, but they are, and they're going to kiss at the end. So the nice thing about something like Arthur Christmas is that, like romance really doesn't play much of a part here. A lot of it is just the race to try and get this girl her bike that she deserves on time before she wakes up to check under the tree for it. So it has a different kind of story than what you might see in your average Hallmark movie. But the thing is that because it is still about the clauses, it feels like Christmas through and through, right? There are still so many, jokes and songs and references and things that they do. So if you are the kind of person that loves, like maximum Christmas in your Christmas movies, you'll definitely get it here. One of the things that I love about the movie is just the creativity. I find many movies nowadays tend to kind of feel like they're sleepwalking, if you will. They might do something that feels familiar, and you hope, like, is there something else that they can do to kind of set themselves apart? And sometimes they just don't. Sometimes they just kind of do the same thing over and over again because it's safe, because they know that if people liked it in another movie, that maybe they'll like it in this movie. So I do love that in Arthur Christmas, you really do see some things that you've never seen before in a movie. So as I mentioned earlier, there's, the delivering the presents to the kids is this big operation, right? So instead of Santa just kind of going down a chimney by himself and leaving a gift and then going, you have all these elves that are helping, these very athletic, precise elves that do all the things they need to do to get to fill the stockings and chop the carrots and leave the gifts where they should be and whatnot. So the creativity in the first 15 minutes is just amazing. It's so fun to see this big operation carried out. And I even had a thought recently about how two other movies in the last 5 years, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and then its sequel, Across the Spider-Verse, released earlier this year, I feel like are both movies that are similar to Arthur Christmas in the sense that sometimes the Spider-Verse movies just have so much going on that you do have to watch it a second time to be able to appreciate everything that's done. Because you have a lot of these kind of quick jokes and quick moves and things that are happening, and sometimes like text is appearing on the screen to kind of give further explanation about something. And it's exciting, but it's a little overwhelming because they don't really give you much of a chance to breathe in these big epic action scenes, if you will. And Arthur Christmas is a lot like this because in this big operation at the beginning of the movie, there is so much that's happening. And I remember seeing it the first time and just going, wow, that's cool. Wow, that's cool. Oh my goodness, I can't believe they did that. Wow, that's awesome. And it just kind of keeps it up for quite some time. So the beginning starts off very impressively. And then the last 15 minutes are also really great too, because without going into any spoilers, because I do not want to spoil it for anyone that's maybe interested in seeing the movie, they also have to use a bit of that creativity as well, because once again, there are all these problems and things they have to figure out as time is running out. And what they come up with is great. Once again, like I think the best compliment I can give it is that it shows me things that I haven't seen in a movie before. And not so much that it's random, but that they show things that make sense within the story that they have started, which is great. Because I think anyone could make a really random movie doing a whole bunch of random things, and you could say, oh yeah, that's weird, I've never seen that before. but what's the point, right? What does it mean at the end of the day? And there's a lot of great meaning behind the creativity that we see at the beginning and end of this movie. And obviously the middle portion is great too, but really it's the first 15 minutes and the last 15 minutes that stick out to me the most. Also, I really love the humor in this movie. There are lots of funny jokes, and I think that is something that can really be hit and miss in family movies, especially because sometimes you might have these crude jokes that are directed at kids, right? Because kids find toilet humor hilarious, but of course that can be something that I think as you get older, you just I don't mind crude humor, but I still need there to be kind of something funny or surprising about it. If it's very basic and done a million times before, chances are I'm not going to laugh at it. But Arthur Christmas has so many funny moments, and a lot of the humor comes from Grand Santa, the eldest Santa, who is kind of retired now basically, but he's the one who helps Arthur try to get the bike to Gwen in time. Grand Santa is voiced by Bill Nye, not the science guy, the British guy who is in Love Actually and played Davy Jones in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. And he is really funny. I don't think I really appreciated his comic timing until I watched a movie like Arthur Christmas. And I think he definitely has some of the best lines in the movie. And yeah, I think this is a movie that is really funny. And I'd be shocked if someone listening to this went out to watch the movie and then didn't find it funny. Because I think it is pretty universal humor that I think anyone can appreciate. Another point I wanted to bring up too is that I think what also works well with Arthur Christmas is that just how much it resonates with me. That as creative as the story is, I think ultimately it is kind of a story about a family. So you have the current Santa and his two sons, Arthur and Steve, and they all kind of have different styles, different ways of handling the current problem. Like I mentioned earlier, Arthur is the one that really wants to get the bike to Gwen, and Steve is the one that kind of convinces Santa that, our efficiency is actually up better than it was last year, so like we did great. Why do we need to, do this one last thing when we already did a great job? Let's just stop now. So what's really great is that all three of them kind of have a different way of doing things. And the family dynamic is one where it's not a family where they're all pretty similar and readily agree with each other on everything. It is something where there's a lot of tension because of how they want to do different things. And once again, I can't get into this too much because I don't want to get into spoilers, but I think it is so beautiful to kind of see how difficult things are at the beginning of the movie with, how things went with the operation and dealing with this child that's been missed. And the fact that Arthur kind of goes without really telling Steve or Santa that he's going to deliver the bike with Gwen, for Gwen, with the help of Grand Santa. But of course, if things are rocky at the beginning, there has to be some change by the end of the movie that shows that there's a change, right? There's an improvement. There's a progression in their dynamic. And what they do in the movie really resonates with me because I like to think it would resonate with anyone that has a family who has slightly different opinions from themselves, that it really works. And I think one of the best things I can say about it is how a movie like It's a Wonderful Life, which I hope everyone listening to this right now has seen, and if you haven't, that's another great one that you got to see. I remember watching it when I was pretty young and thinking it was fine, but I feel like with each passing year, as I got older, as I changed a bit, that the last 10 minutes of that movie, or really the whole movie in all honesty, but the last 10 minutes really hit me hard because it meant something a little different to me every year. Not that the meaning changed completely, but that I think I could more easily resonate and relate with what was going on. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why the movie has just gotten stronger and stronger every year that I watch it. And I think Arthur Christmas has something like that too, because it is very heartfelt. And I love that the way that they find to kind of wrap things up, pun intended, if you will, on how this family is going to get along, because there's a number of ways that the family can kind of move forward with next year's Christmas, if you will. But the way they capture it and the way that they kind of highlight it, despite all the craziness that we've seen in the movie of time is running out, you need to get this bike to Gwen, it's just really beautiful. And of course, I know that obviously what I'm saying would probably have more meaning if I did get into spoilers, but I don't want to, just in the event that you haven't seen the movie. So I think for me, Yeah, Arthur Christmas is just a wonderful, very festive, very funny, creative, and heartfelt movie, and I can't recommend it enough. And I hope that all of my rambling about this movie gets you to consider to sit down and watch it, because now is the perfect time, right? I mean, we're a little less than 2 weeks away from Christmas, and if you are looking for a Christmas movie that you haven't seen before, I cannot recommend Arthur Christmas enough. So this is my plea to please watch the movie. If you're my friend on Facebook, you might see how, like, every year, every other year, I kind of mention, like, oh, if you haven't seen Arthur Christmas, you should. And I'm glad that I have an opportunity here to kind of talk about it a little more extensively than I would if I was doing a scripted video. So yeah, I think that's what I have to say here. And the good thing is that this movie is on Netflix. So obviously, it's been helpful to rewatch the movie every year because it's usually on Netflix around Christmas time. So if you have Netflix, I would say, go watch it there. Or if you don't have Netflix, but you don't mind paying like $5 or $6 to rent it off of YouTube or Cineplex or any other kind of streaming app where it's more about rentals and less about, having everything included for a monthly price, I would say please spend a couple bucks and rent it. I don't think you'll be sorry. If you guys have any comments, questions, or thoughts about the video, you can leave a comment below the video and let me know. Like, is there something else that you want me to do? Is there another short segment? Some of the ideas I had were talking about a movie briefly that I really liked, that I think is worthy of your time, or listing a fun movie fact. Whatever the case may be, you guys let me know. Thank you again for listening. I really appreciate this. And that's all I got to say.